Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I want to share with you the 5th grade curriculum for live education. This is a box curriculum, so it's going to come with all the subjects you need for 5th grade, and this is also a Waldorf curriculum. The first thing I want to point out is that I added these labels to the front cover of each of the books that comes for the 5th grade year, because not all of the books say 5th grade or 5th year on it. Because we own the complete curriculum from kindergarten through 8th grade, I was getting a little confused with what books went with each grade, so I went ahead and I added my own labels to them. Alright, so I want to first show you that you don't actually get a huge bulky curriculum when you're getting the live education curriculum. There's a lot of reasons for this, and as I go through each book, I'm going to explain some of the reasons why this is not your typical boxed curriculum. All right, now there are going to be some other supplement materials that you're going to need that don't come with this curriculum, and I'm going to point those out along the way. The first thing I want to show you is the introduction to the 5th year. Now, every grade comes with a little booklet like this, and it's going to overview the complete year, like the whole year, but more importantly, it's going to explain the philosophy of the Waldorf education specific for that year. It's also going to go over the child development, not just for that particular year, but also for what came before and what's going to follow. This is especially helpful for somebody who wants to do the Waldorf philosophy or who wants to implement more of that into their homeschool, but doesn't know much about the philosophy itself. This really breaks it down in a very easy format. So the 5th grade year happens to be in the middle of the 3 major developmental stages that occur in childhood. So you have the first stage from 0 to 7, you have the next stage from 7 to 14, and then the next stage after that is from 14 to 21. Generally in the 0 to 7 age, this is a time where the will dominates, which means that you've got a lot of movement and activity, and this is the means of how children are going to learn by doing. So they're imitating their parents, they're imitating their peers around them. This is something that is very iconic for the ages of 0 to 7. Then the next age bracket is 7 to 14. This is a time where the feelings and the emotions are taking center stage for the child. And then after that, from age 14 to age 21, it's when the intellect takes center stage, and that's when a lot of critical thinking and deep thinking and the intellect really takes center stage. So 5th grade, which is around 10 years old, is the middle of the middle and the heart of childhood in essence. And I really like the way that that's described in this introductory book. And a lot of Waldorf teachers make a note that teaching 5th grade happens to be one of their favorite grades to teach. Also, something about teachers in Waldorf schools is that there are kindergarten teachers, and kindergarten lasts till about age 7. But then from grade 1 to grade 8, you stay with the same teacher for all of those years. So that's a little bit unique for this type of schooling. And while you may see some potential downfalls for having a single teacher for all those years, I think the benefits far outweigh any negative that could come from having a single teacher, especially now. If you're watching this and you're a homeschooler, I hope that you would see the greater benefits of having a single teacher all that time. And you as a parent may also note that teaching your 10-year-old may also be a really wonderful, enjoyable time. So why is that? Why is teaching a 10-year-old especially a nice time versus other years? So anybody who has a teenager probably knows the additional challenges of teaching a child, or a child in transition into adulthood, that there are those challenges and difficulties when that person is going through so many changes and trying to find themselves and dealing with this new ability to think more deeply and establishing their own opinions about the world and challenging their own opinions about their family, or the opinions that they've grown up with. That can be an especially stressful time. The time just prior to that, when the child is going through a growth spurt where their limbs are becoming extended, a time when their coordination seems to really fail them, a time of gangliness and awkwardness, that time is difficult for a child. There's so many changes going on faster than the brain can keep up with it. It can be a little disconcerting. So before that, around age 10, is a time when the body is in homeostasis. It's done with the baby growth spurt. It's also done with the emotional turmoil of the 9-year change, which is a very significant change that occurs between the ages of 7 and 14. So you have an emotional stability and you also have a physical stability prior to all of that being upset again so that a new change can occur. And from my own experience teaching my 10-year-old this year and teaching my oldest 2 children who are now 15 and 18 back at this time happened to be a really good time. Now, when I was teaching my oldest 2 who are now 15 and 18, when they were 10 and 11 years old, I also had a lot of, younger children. That was a little bit more difficult because I was also dealing with younger children. Now I have a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, 15-year-old, and an 18-year-old. So this year of homeschooling has been especially beautiful with my 6-year-old and 10-year-old because it's a time of just really great companionship and peace and harmony. So it's been a lovely time. Now, it's a whole different story with my 15-year-old, but that's a whole different video. So this is something that I really like about this curriculum is that it's going to explain, what I just explained, only far better and more concise and more precise. And so that's something that is so important to know because this is an easy year from a teaching perspective, but it's not always going to be an easy year. And the curriculum is going to illuminate those things that could be potential challenges and also give you some ways to deal with that. Because I feel like when you understand what's going on with your child from an emotional and physical perspective, then you can have a little more compassion and sympathy and understanding for what they're going through so that it doesn't cause so much frustration on your part. Now, the curriculum itself also is very responsive to these changes going on. And so the way that it's going to teach the subjects for this year and even the choices in the subjects are based on this 10-year-old who is in a state of, peace and harmony and is ready for some epic stories of the past and some beautiful artistic representations for math and science. And so you're going to see that in the curriculum. All right, so this particular book also explains the materials that you're going to need, how to set up your day and your whole year. It has suggestions for opening activities. So there's songs and poems and mental math and the times tables. The times tables are review for what the child had done previously. So it's going to outline all of these things that you're going to need to be aware of for the whole year. It really helps you figure out where to place your main lessons and your the way you're going to place your lessons, basically your lesson blocks throughout the year. And it also suggests how many weeks to do for each of the main lesson blocks. So this is something also that may be unusual for you if you're not familiar with a Waldorf style of teaching. Basically, you're going to have these main lesson blocks where it's a concentration on a particular subject area. It's different than a unit study in that not all the subjects are necessarily being brought into that particular unit. It's really just a focus on a particular subject area. Main lessons tend to take up to 2 hours a day, but it's not the only thing that you're doing every day. You're also carrying on with some smaller, more regular daily exercises, and those you're really going to see when you see the outline of the whole day with your opening activities, with your review, with your mental math. All of these things are going to deal with the things that you're going to do on a regular daily basis, but sometimes you may not have a particular main lesson block for it. So it helps you include spelling and vocabulary and writing into the daily work as well as into your main lesson block. But you're not, for this particular age group, for this grade, you're not going to have a separate spelling, vocabulary, writing, and language arts main lesson. All right, so let's go through what you actually get for the 5th grade year, and then I'm also going to show you some of the supplements that you'll need. Botany is one of my all-time favorite main lesson blocks. We happen to be in the middle of it right now. I'm going to link that complete playlist at the end of this video. I will give you a little sneak peek at some of the entries that we have done for our main lesson book. We typically use a main lesson book that's already bound, and then we just fill in that main lesson book. But this one, because we wanted to do a lot more like a varied medium, like various mediums for our art projects, we decided to do them separately and then bind them later. But a typical main lesson book, this is one that I made on my own, just got some drawing paper from the craft store and some construction paper and took it over to a local office supply store, and I had it bound. But you can also buy them from Waldorf suppliers online, and they come in various sizes depending on the grade level. Some of them come with lined, a page that has lines and then a page that's blank so that you could do your drawings. And then some of them are larger and they've got blank pages on both sides. And then something that's going to go along with those, aside from a pencil, are some color pencils, because a lot of the things that you're going to do will be drawing for your main lesson. So you can use color pencils. For this particular unit, we did a lot with watercolors and other mediums. So this curriculum has a very unique approach to dealing with pretty much every subject area. And I know that we've really loved and used this curriculum, so a lot of my notes happen to be on the margins of these pages. I highlight and underline things that I find important, and you can see a lot of chalk fingers that had chalk on it touching these pages because we did a lot of chalk drawings as well. But that is how we roll in this family when it comes to lesson planning and using this curriculum. The great thing about every single book that you're going to get with this particular curriculum is that it's not just going to give you all the lessons, but it's also going to give you kind of like a backstory of how this particular subject area ended up in this year and how it's being taught and the uniqueness of how it's being taught. So it's going to say, for botany in particular, is that generally in botany, the idea of reproduction, like how plants reproduce, is the main focus of botany. But in this curriculum, they don't want it to be the main focus because that's a little too technical. They want, because your child at 10 years old is still in the emotional feeling phase of development, they want the entire curriculum for botany to be something that speaks to the emotions and the feelings of the child. So we're going to do that in two ways. The first way is through art, that they want the beauty of nature to come through for the child. And I especially saw that this year when we did our botany unit. And then the next thing that's really iconic with the Waldorf philosophy is that you're always starting the first lesson pretty much with a lot of these different science and even math and potentially history curricula or main lesson blocks, is that you're starting with the whole, the complete picture first. And then you can look at the different pieces. So the very first lesson for botany is looking at the whole plant first. And then the next lesson actually brings you into the picture. But then after that, you're starting with a very simple plant that is not a complete plant. It's not a whole plant. It's an ancient plant, really. And it goes through talking about this plant represents part of the whole plant, in that it represents mainly the fruit part of the whole plant, and it grows really fast, just like a baby grows really fast. So it's really taking you through like this growth from baby to maturity and adulthood in a way that is not direct. It's really subtle and indirect. And then you move on to another plant that also doesn't express a complete plant. The ferns are part of a plant, or they have parts of the plant, but they're missing other parts of the complete plant. And then it goes through all the way until you get to the complete plant with the flower and the fruit and different things from your area, or the different kinds of foods that people eat. But it really is a beautiful progression for the botany curriculum. As with all of the different books, it's going to have this resource book, or this source book that they recommend. And while I couldn't find all of the ones that were in here, you will potentially need one to supplement the information that comes in the book. However, this one comes with so much information for each lesson, you could potentially get by without a resource book. But this is the resource book that we recently picked up, called The ABCs of Nature, and we found a lot of really helpful information in here that work perfectly with our botany main lesson block. So this was definitely something that came in handy. Also, all of the lessons come with lesson activities, as well as dictation or writing or copy work that you can do with each one. A child can do his own narration, or you can copy what is in the book, or you can read this aloud and then your child can copy it into his main lesson book. Before I get into the history main lesson books, because there are all history except for geometry. Geometry happens to be one of my favorite as well. Botany and geometry and astronomy are probably my 3 favorite main lesson blocks of almost all of the Waldorf curriculum. But of course, as I get through it, you'll probably find other ones that I love. Geometry is another one that I have a lot of sample lessons and tutorials on my channel. I'm going to link that at the end of this video. You can find that in the description box as well. This one, again, goes through an artistic approach to teaching geometry. Usually in geometry, you have a lot of proofs and theorems and math and things that really don't make sense when you haven't been able to experience it. It's quite abstract to be thinking about these 2-dimensional and potentially 3-dimensional shapes. And so instead, this curriculum is going to bring it down to starting with you, your relationship with it, and then you creating these different shapes by drawing lines across a page and then having them intersect in order to create triangles, for instance, or drawing the absolute tiniest little dot on a page, which represents a point, but a point doesn't take up any space, so it's really hard to understand that. And then points and rays, that's some of the first lessons. For this, we used a very somewhat concrete example of life and existence, So your birth is like a point, and then your life is like a line, and then your death is like another point. And so we use those examples. That was not in the book. That was just something that I added to it to try to explain those different concepts. Now, for this particular book, we're going to be doing geometry. This is for 5th grade, but you will need some additional materials for your daily math, and they are recommending the Key to Fractions and Key to Decimals books 1 through 4. This is by Key Curriculum Press, and this is what they look like. I have done a complete review of these workbooks, all of them, on my channel. That link is below as well, and you can take a look at the complete series. We really, really like these workbooks. They are the only workbooks that we buy. Once we were introduced to them through this curriculum, I absolutely fell in love with them. They're very simple, they're very direct, they stay on point, they really keep the information simple, direct, lots of practice, easy instructions. It's really child-led. You don't need a lot more instruction than what's given if you're doing this at grade level or below grade level. If you're trying to do this for a really young child, and I mean like doing, say, fractions and decimals starting in, like, say, 3rd or 4th grade versus 4th or 5th grade, for instance, then you will need to do more instruction for your child. So we really love these. Excellent book to add to this particular curriculum. All right, so the rest of the curriculum, which includes 5 main lesson books, are all dedicated to ancient history. So the first one I want to go through is Ancient India. And again, what you're going to find is an introduction to the ancient cultures, why it's being introduced at this stage, and how it's being introduced. Now, a lot of the main lesson books are going to come with enough information for you to read through and then deliver a lesson. Now, these lessons are meant to be orally delivered. It's not something that the child is going to read on his own. It's not even something that typically you would read aloud. Now, I know that when I don't have time to prepare and read the information first and then deliver as an oral lesson, then I will go ahead and read this straight out of the book. But in general, it's best if you can prepare ahead of time. But, we know when you have multiple kids, that can be a challenge. And even if you have one kid, that can be a challenge. Now, this curriculum, which is really beautiful, comes with a lot of original artwork, and this can be used as inspiration for your own drawings. And I have the main lesson books for my children for all of 5th grade, and in a separate video, I'll show you all of those. And we decided for Ancient India, I think, to do all watercolors because so many of the examples were really beautiful watercolors. So this is something that you will also need to purchase separately from the curriculum. And they suggest Stockmar watercolors and also really thick watercolor paper, about 140 pound, as well as really broad paint brushes, because you're still doing things without a lot of detail at this point. It's still really, in a way, kind of magical and ethereal and touching the feelings rather than it being specific. It's more about the spirit of the lesson rather than it being really technical. So this is wet on wet watercoloring, and I also have a tutorial on how to do that, and you can check out that video down below. All right, so this is the Ancient India book. Let's move on to the Culture of Ancient Egypt. This is actually a much smaller book, and this one highly suggests getting a couple of resource books to complement this particular unit. This one again has the beautiful artwork that's in here and a lot of information. Even if you didn't get a resource book, it does still have a lot of information that you could use, as well as lesson activities for you to do in order to enhance this main lesson block. There's also Ancient Mesopotamia. Again, it comes with the introduction to the whole entire main lesson and how to teach it and why it's being taught at this point. And then, of course, those beautiful watercolors and different artwork. This one, again, comes with a lot of information. So if you didn't have an opportunity to buy an additional resource book, then this would be fine. And again, you can tell the artwork is just really just beautiful. This one happens to be more detailed than some of the other ones. But I remember doing this with my kids several years ago, and it was just a really, really lovely main lesson unit. And then we have the Ancient Culture of Persia. This one is a little bit thicker, and it's very similar to the other main lesson blocks for history. I do a lot of my lesson planning there in the margins. You can see me doing like the little main lesson book with the drawing and what we're going to write about and what we're going to draw and stuff. So again, just really very well done, very complete. And then the last one is Teaching Ancient Greek Mythology. And this one recommends getting a mythology book. So Gods and Heroes or D'Alier's Greek Myths. And so both of those would be great additions to this curriculum. And I know that we have the Greek Myths book, and it's a really easy read, really beautifully illustrated, and it's a nice addition to the curriculum. Now, when you're doing the main lesson blocks for these history units, it's certainly not going to cover everything. In fact, there's a very specific way that the information is being delivered and which information is actually being covered. So for the philosophy behind the Waldorf education. The idea for history at this age is still more about culture, religion, the belief system, rather than people, dates, and historical events. You're going to get to that later, but for ancient history, it's more epic and it's more grand and it's a little bit more fantastical, especially when you're looking at Greek mythology and the Greek gods, and then you've got ancient India and that creation story. So you're going to be looking at the belief system, the creation story for each of these different cultures, and you're going to be looking at the culture. So culture through their belief system. There may be a few important historical figures, but that's going to take second stage to the belief system. And so the idea is that the way you really get to know a people is by knowing what they believe in, and that's the point of studying the history in this manner for this age group. Later, there will be you can revisit these topics at an older age with historical events and dates and more people. But for this, you're looking at the mythology, you're looking at some of the fantastical events of the past, and because they are so ancient, you are actually going to see some ancient stories kind of repeated in the different cultures, but with their own unique spin on it. So you're going to see the Great Flood occur in multiple cultures, because it happened so far back in time that so many different cultures have adopted that story as their own. So I thought that was kind of interesting to go through. Okay, so I think that covers the complete curriculum, as well as some of the additional resources that you'll need. You definitely will need your Key to Curriculum series, as well as a couple of resource books. You'll need some main lesson books, as well as some art supplies. Overall, we've really enjoyed working with this curriculum, and I hope that you do too if you try it out. If you have any questions about this curriculum, please do leave them in the comment section below.